Hi everyone, how's it going? Hope you're all well. It's very hot here today, so I'm in my summery attire. Just thought I would do a quick video looking at some keyboard players. This is not a topic which I see a great deal of on YouTube. Keyboard players get a bit of a kind of secondary star billing really after the guitar player. You know, everybody watches the guitarist. Keyboard players, I think, struggle to get the same level of kudos, but there are some great ones. Now, what I thought I'd do is tie this in to the fact that we've actually lost a couple of keyboard players in recent days. First of all, we lost Florian Schneider, who was from Kraftwerk. Make sure I get the right guy. There he is. There. Just been reading about him. He was a flute player originally, but he decided that the flute was narrowing his creative scope too much. So he wanted to start to explore with electronics, and you know, as part of Kraftwerk, he just became massively influential on pop music. So yeah, just wanted to give a quick little tribute to Florian, and there he is in his Red Splendor on the Man Machine record. And we lost another keyboard player, and that is the great Dave Greenfield from the Stranglers. Now, Dave, he again was a really influential keyboard player. It's quite an interesting dynamic in the Stranglers because they had a very kind of yobbish sound. You know, they were not. Well, I mean, some people did consider them to be a punk band, but they were sort of older than the punks. But they had a very abrasive, very kind of dark, churning kind of sound, quite kind of guitar heavy, quite brutal. But there was this interesting dynamic because Dave's keyboards were almost kind of prog rock in places. They were kind of classic rock, prog rock. You know, there was all sorts of influences. You could hear Ray Manzarek from The Doors in there, but you could hear other stuff too that was even more progressive. He had lots of keyboards, and he did lots of kind of just really good kind of floaty, kind of virtuosic keyboard stuff that was somehow integrated into this very thuggish sounding punk sound. I'm going to put a playlist together of some of these guys. You know, you can hear any Kraftwerk track really, but I'll put a couple of links to a couple of my favourite songs. I think I'm going to go with The Model and Computer World for him. For Dave Greenfield, I mean, there's lots and lots to choose from. He was instrumental in the composition of the great song Golden Brown, which has a very unusual time signature. I think it has a bar in 4/4 and then a bar in 5/4 or something like that, you know. And it has a very melodic, elegiac kind of quality to it with that kind of harpsichord. So I'd certainly name check that as a great track to listen out for. Also on this record, I love the song Peasant and the Big Shitty, which has some really, really cool keyboards on it. So check that one out as well. So there we go, little tribute to two fallen keyboard players. So what I thought I'd do now is just whiz through some other of my favourites and then invite you to do the same if you have any favourite keyboard players. And I'm going to end with my all-time favourite keyboard player, okay, in a pop rock context. I'm not going to go too deeply into, well, in fact, I'm not going to go any distance at all into jazz, okay. I'm going to look at one rock jazz fusion guy, but I'm not going to start exploring jazz music and classical music because it will be too wide ranging. I'm going to keep it to pop rock, okay. So, and a fair few of these are going to be quite obvious choices, but never mind. So I've already mentioned Ray Manzarek already. There's the big guy. Now he played the bass with his feet. Now it was either live or in the studio. I can never remember which is which, but he was a very accomplished jazzy classical pianist. You know, his work on Light My Fire is just amazing. It's a kind of almost a sort of stream of consciousness approach that he had. It was all completely rooted in the blues and in blue note jazz. And Light My Fire is an extraordinary piece of work, and it sort of largely hinges on the drums and the keyboards, really, I would argue. You know, Ray played an absolutely pivotal role in the band, and on their last album he did some great work as well. You know, his organ playing on LA Woman is just amazing. But the track that I'd like to highlight from this record really is Riders on the Storm, where he brilliantly evokes the atmosphere of a thunderstorm, and the kind of tinkly quality of the piano lines, or the electric piano lines, really summons up the pitter-pattering of rain. Really clever, quite sort of impressionistic. I think he was quite influenced by people like Debussy. You know, he had a kind of modern 20th century classical frame of reference. Here he is there, Ray Manzarek. Wonderful musician. Okay, next we've got Rick Wright, or Richard Wright from Pink Floyd, who again was a jazz guy. He'd been really influenced by Miles Davis and A Kind of Blue. He came into Pink Floyd, I think, being the only jazz-influenced musician. I think Roger Waters had enjoyed some jazz in his youth, but he wasn't a very good musician particularly, whereas Rick Wright had actually learned to play jazz piano. He wasn't a very, very over-the-top virtuosic guy. He couldn't play very fast, complex things, but he was amazingly tasteful, and he knew some interesting chords. On this record, you've got the song Us and Them, which contains at least one chord which he directly stole from, or borrowed from A Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. But there's all sorts of beautiful suspended piano shapes, chord shapes and harmonic progressions. He was able to kind of, he used to go from A to B, but he would go via F and G. He was just able to take the long route round in terms of putting progressions together, and his stuff could be very spectral. Think of all the sort of early stuff he did in the '60s Floyd, where it was all kind of trebly organs, and absolutely brilliant contributions to songs like See Emily Play, and then later on, in the 1970s, all that wonderful floaty, atmospheric stuff he did on Shining You Crazy Diamond. But one of my favourite things he ever did was the song Sheep on Animals, which is a very it's sort of slashing aggro rock, I think it was once described as by a notable critic in the 1970s. But Rick Wright does this brilliant sort of tinkly Rhodes piano solo at the start of that song, it's kind of incongruous, but it's just got this wonderful kind of air of suppressed menace, and it kind of gradually builds. He sort of holds the note down with his left hand, and he's playing all this tinkly stuff, and really nice and simple. All kind of derived from blues scales. But he was a master at piecing together or stringing together little phrases into a narrative kind of shape. And when that keyboard solo goes into the track Animals, it just works so well. And on stage he was brilliant as well. He would have this arsenal of keyboards, and he would just do wonderful things. Textures and kind of ambience, just really, really good. And this next guy, quite similar, I suppose. This is Tony Banks, and on from Genesis, and he was much less jazzy than Rick Wright. He didn't really have a jazz background. He had a classical background, and you can kind of hear that really. I think he and Rick Wakeman, who I'm not going to feature. Not because I don't like him, but because he just didn't fall into my 10. Tony Banks and Rick Wakeman were the two big kind of classical pianists or keyboard players from the 1970s era, and they were both capable of some great kind of pyrotechnical stuff, But Tony Banks was also an absolute master at atmosphere. And the first song on this album, Watcher of the Skies, just begins with the most atmospheric kind of organ you've ever heard in your life, and it just evokes, I don't know, kind of stormy skies and this kind of atmosphere of brooding, kind of like the calm before the storm. He did all sorts of wonderful, wonderful piano work. On Selling England by the Pound, he just did some amazingly florid things on that. But as time went on, he learnt more to work in the kind of pop idiom, and on this album he does some great things. The track Dodo on this album is a big favourite of mine. It's kind of vistas of keyboards just stretching off as far as the eye can see. It's really, in fact it's still got the kind of prog element to it, but like I said, in the 80s he turned his hand to pop, and he simplified the sequences, and he was able to craft some really memorable things. One of my favourite things he did was the keyboard solo on That's All from the eponymous Genesis album, which is beautiful. It's just got this beautiful sound to it, and it's so hooky and memorable. But anyway, yeah, Dodo is a great Tony track as well. Okay, so the next guy is also, he is prog rock really. He played in Asia, he played in Yes, but I'm going to focus on the two albums that he made with the Buggles, and this is Jeff Downes. There he is. And he was another kind of classical guy, but I think he might have had a bit of jazz in his blood. I'm not absolutely sure. But his harmonic awareness was really something else. He knew the way around a an extended chord sequence, and he was able to craft things that were very mellifluous and beautiful and very, very classical sounding. On this record, you've got the song Elstree, which is just absolutely gorgeous, and it ends with this very kind of it starts with this very elegiac kind of piano piece, and then it, goes into the main part of the song. And he was great. I mean, he used to have loads of keyboards around him, a bit like Rick Wakeman, and he did all sorts of good stuff later with Asia. He was on the Drama album as well. He did some good stuff on that. There's some great keyboards on Into the Lens, which also cropped up on this record. On the second Buggles album, it morphed into the song I Am a Camera. But the track that I love from this record that Jeff plays on is the third track. It's called Vermilion Sands, and it has this almost like a kind of Ray Manzarek kind of cocktail piano part in it, which is really affecting. It's really beautiful. It kind of sparkles and hangs in the air, Jeff Downes, he was a very pretty keyboard player. He was able to evoke an atmosphere of nostalgia in his music, and unlike a lot of the prog guys, he knew how to keep it simple. That was one thing that Rick Wakeman struggled to do, I think, was keep his parts simple. He used to overcrowd things and just put too much in. Think of all that ridiculous church organ stuff on the Going for the One album, where he just plays all the way through every song. It's just kind of far too much. Restraint is a good thing in music. Okay, so that's the end of the prog rock guys, although we do have a rock jazz fusion one still to come. So let's move more into a sort of pop idiom. I couldn't not mention Jools Holland, who was probably, one of the two best keyboard players, I think, to come out of the new wave movement. He'd schooled himself in boogie-woogie piano from a young age. And, even though in later years he did become a bit annoying, if you think about, later with Jools Holland, where he's always permanently playing boogie-woogie piano, in Squeeze, that was kept firmly in check, because he was playing the songs of Difford and Tilbrook, and he didn't really get too much opportunity to constantly boogie-woogify everything. But on this record, you've got the track on Argy Bargy, you've got Pulling Muscles from the Shell, the high point of which probably is Jools Holland's keyboard solo, his piano solo, which has got a real kind of star turn quality to it, and it's very bluesy, and it's just absolutely perfect. On this record, on the Frank record from several years later, he has a couple of brilliant spots. He plays the most blinding piano solo in the song Payton Place, which is just a beautiful pop song, really. It's not really a boogie woogie thing, but he plays a solo which is it's masterful in the way it's constructed. And apparently when he played it in the studio, I think he'd written the solo, he'd composed the solo, it wasn't just an improvised thing. And Glenn Tilbrook said he couldn't believe how great it was. He didn't know what Jools was going to do. He had a certain number of bars in the song, to play something, and Jools came in and just played this blinding solo, first take, and everybody was just like, wow, that's amazing, And but also on this record he plays Dr. Jazz as well, which is his tribute to New Orleans funk jazz music, and that's just fantastic as well. Right, this next guy is probably one of the most understated keyboard players that you'll ever hear, and that is Benmont Tench from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. He was with the Heartbreakers all the way through their career. That's him there in the middle. And he was very tasteful. He played very restrained kind of organ textures and little bluesy organ runs, but they were so integral to the songs. I mean, I'm going to pick two songs. Any Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers song is good, for Benmont, because he was so consistent. But off Southern Accents, if you listen to the first song, Rebels, that's just got some really great keyboard parts in it, which they just sort of glue the gaps in the guitars. He just knew exactly what to play and when to play it. I think his sound was the glue in that group. Even though they were a very guitar-based band, the keyboards just introduced that other kind of element, that kind of ear-catching element. And he plays some great stuff on this record too, on Damn the Torpedoes. If you listen to any of the songs on this record, just listen to Refugee. Again, it's got some great keyboard parts on it. Benmont Tench. Okay, so the next person I want to talk about is Bill Payne from the rock funk band Little Feat, who was one of a group of absolutely brilliant musicians. And again, a bit like Benmont Tench, he was very tasteful. He knew exactly what to play in which song. His stuff didn't sort of jump out at you too much, but he was capable of doing some pretty inventive things. The two tracks I'd like to highlight from this record actually are Day and Night and Down Below the Borderline. Bill was a founder member of Little Feat, and I think he was with them all the way through. I was reading about him, and he's kind of up there, you know, he's kind of known as being one of the great all-time sort of blues, rock keyboard players from the 1970s, and everything he did was really tasteful, and he could kind of groove along with the band. Little Feat were a groove band, and he definitely knew how to kind of, you know, groove along with the best of them. Right, so we've got two left. I'm going to look at the jazz, at the rock fusion guy, and then we're going to finish with my all-time favourite pop rock keyboard player. Okay, so we're going to look at Yawn Hammer from the Mahavishnu Orchestra. This is the album Birds of Fire. So he played the Moog or the Moog, and you know, various keyboards in this band, and fairly difficult being in a group where you've got someone like John McLaughlin, who's obviously this kind of very fiery post-Hendrix guitar player who really plays a lot of notes in every single song, you know. But Yawn Hammer does some great stuff on this record. If you listen to the song, or the track, should I say, Celestial Terrestrial Commuters, he does some really, really cool stuff on that track. It's only a short track, and John McLaughlin plays some really cool sort of, you know, guitar stuff, and then Yawn Hammer comes in, plays his own kind of, it's like a kind of space organ kind of sound, you know, a bit like Herbie Hancock in the sort of Headhunters thrust era, very kind of squelchy, funky kind of keyboards. Brilliant. Yawn Hammer, love him. Oh, and I've got this one to show you as well, the first album. Right, so we're going to look at my favourite keyboard player now from the world of pop rock, and I'm going to show you two records. Let's go in chronological order. The first one is this. This is Armed Forces by Elvis Costello, and the keyboard person in question is Steve Naive, who was a very young guy when he first joined the band. He didn't really know too much about rock music. He'd come straight from music college, really, and he kind of just totally evolved into this absolutely stunning musician. Let's find a picture of Steve. Where is he now? There he is there. He was very accomplished. Like I said, he'd had the musical training, but he so quickly learned to adapt to become this kind of quite aggressive. Well, he could be aggressive, you know, in the context of Costello and the Attractions. Obviously, you had this very aggressive new wave power pop kind of sound, but Steve was able to channel the aggression into his keyboards, but he was also able to introduce a real element of kind of ornate beauty into what he was doing. He was really eclectic, so he would listen to people like ABBA, you know, and obviously, you know, the track I'm going to choose from this record to kind of illustrate his greatness is Oliver's Army, where he borrowed the piano chord style from Dancing Queen by ABBA. It just works so well. It kind of makes the song, you know. The reason he's my favourite is that virtually any song that he plays on, it's his contribution which makes the song. I mean, you've got a lot of good stuff going on in Costello and the Attractions music. You've got Elvis's lyrics, you've got fantastic drumming by Paul Thomas, from Pete Thomas, you've got this amazing propulsive bass work from Bruce Thomas. But if it wasn't for Steve Naive's contribution, I think they would have been a lot less of a group, really. You know, his Farfisa organ and just his wonderful, beautiful piano work, very classical sounding. It just worked brilliantly as the contrast between that, a bit like in the Stranglers with Dave Greenfield, that contrast between the thuggish guitar sound and the kind of attitudey, punky kind of sound of the band, with this very classical, ornate kind of keyboards going on this track, on this album, Get Happy. I love what he does on Men Called Uncle. He just plays this very, very hooky, memorable piano line at the start of the song, and it's almost like a kind of detuned piano. It makes it sound a bit sort of honky-tonky, and he was supremely tasteful in everything that he did. And you know, there was not one song that he ever played on where his contribution did something adverse to the song. He would always enhance it, and he was so accomplished. I saw him play. I never saw him with the Attractions, but strangely enough, I saw him play with Squeeze on the Some Fantastic Place tour. Squeeze had Pete Thomas on drums from the Attractions, and they also had Steve Naive on keyboards, and he was brilliant. He had all this hair over his face, and he was, you know, playing these keyboards and just really playing some amazing stuff. He does duo shows with Costello now, where they just go on stage in front of massive festival crowds, and Costello just has Steve, you know, playing the piano. Really, really stunning talent, I think. So yeah, that's what makes him my favourite. Right, so I hope you enjoyed that, and I'd be very interested to hear who your favourite keyboard players are, if you have any. So please make a response if you would care to, or just leave some comments down below. Alright folks, take care, see you soon, bye bye.